evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome at IJR. Tonight here we are, I think, facing the prospect of a very exciting meeting and conversation, a sort of new format that we're also experimenting with, but I think the anticipation in the room already is testimony to the fact that we're all anticipating something special tonight. Before we get there, this evening has a second purpose, and that is to launch a new partnership between the University of the Free State and the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation. These two institutions have collaborated in the past on issues of reconciliation. Pumla is actually, Dr. Pumla Kabodo Marigizela is the link between the two institutions because she's a professor at UFS, but she's also a board member of IJR. And so in that capacity, she's been an instigator in all sorts of collaborative projects over the years between the two institutions. And we're now taking this to a new level. And as IJR, we're very honored by this partnership. What it will entail and what will happen is that we will combine public dialogue such as this one with in-depth research on trauma in our society. We think it's a much neglected theme. If you look at the levels of mental illness, if you look at the levels of aggression in our society, violence, if you look at lawlessness, if you look at addiction levels in our communities, that somehow post-apartheid trauma is alive and well in various shapes and sizes in our community. And so this has motivated, firstly, Pumla, because it's her inspiration and her leadership to come up with a proposal that is now funded, accepted by the Mellon Foundation, and on that basis also approached IJR to become a partner in this process. So we're very excited and we look forward both to the public dimension of this, but also to the in-depth research that will be conducted over time in a variety of our communities. Let me just say from the onset, we had a bit of a conceptualization brainstorming this afternoon that we're not going to pathologize a segment of society here to say, you know, because crime levels are high here, you are more traumatized than those of us who live where we can hide our trauma behind high walls and so on. No, this is about the societal dimension of trauma, which we will try and understand in all the dimensions. I just want to also acknowledge Fidi Bubenza and her team in the Institute who have actually taken up this challenge in an already full work plan and have basically handled it from IJR's side. So Fidi, thank you very, very much. I know Stan is involved in there as well, and also Sarah van der Walt. And probably others that I'm not mentioning now, but thank you very much for that. And I think given that is now resting between these two formidable women, there will be something very good coming out of this project, Fidi and Pumla. Let me just finally say that we are very, very happy also tonight to have such a full house here. This is becoming a bit of a tradition now, and we hope that we can even more regularly have these public events where we can stimulate public discourse and debate as indeed we've done in the past. But with those words, welcome tonight. I also want to just say welcome to our speakers from my side. Albie, Judge Albie has a long history with IJR also. We're very proud to call him one of our Reconciliation Award winners, which if you remember the year that he got the award, that made for quite some debate in the media about what reconciliation is all about around Albie's life and story. And then Candice, and your story has been an inspiration to so many of us. And so, you know, we are most thankful that you've come also to. For those of us who are here for an interesting evening, for our speakers, it's also putting their own stories and lives on the line by coming here. So we appreciate that very much indeed. Stan will be facilitating soon, but I'm going to hand over first to Pumla to say a few words.
Thank you very much, Fanny, and thank you to you all for coming tonight to be listeners to this conversation we're about to have. And I just want to say just a few words. Firstly, before I do though, I want to refer to the project that Fanny has mentioned in his welcoming speech. This project is titled Trauma, Memory and Representations of the Past. We are interested in understanding what is the impact of our past in the present. Now, in asking that question, we are not simply just interested in gazing at the past. We're interested in really looking into how can we move forward. But in order to do that, in order to understand how we move forward, we have to understand what are the repercussions of the past that sometimes prevent us from moving forward. It's very important for us to know what the impact of the past is and how we can intervene. And so the Mellon Foundation is supporting our work through the university where I am at, the University of the Free State. I'm very pleased to mention some of my colleagues who are partners on this project, because although it is based or housed at the University of the Free State at the moment, we have partners from other institutions as well. One of those is Professor Kopano Ratele, who is from the University of South Africa and the Medical Research Council. Professor Ratele is in the room with us today. I'm mentioning those who are in the room today. We have Kim Whale, Dr. Kim Whale, who is a postdoctoral fellow at our universities through this work that represents this project. Dr. Samantha van Skalkwyk is also in the room. Those are some of our partners besides IJR partners. I would also like to mention from our university the director of institutional advancement at our university, the University of the Free State, Dr. Marcus Ingram, who is with me from the University of the Free State, co-organizing and partnering with our partners here at the Institutes for Justice and Reconciliation. So thank you very much, Marcus, for being with us on this project. We are very much looking forward to the conversation today. We have had both Judge Albie Sachs at our university and Candice Mama, and what they represent for us is exactly this question of what does change mean? And through the conversation, we hope to get an understanding of their journey, and therefore we want to get to these questions of what is it exactly that happens when things change. We are not blind to the massive problems that we face in our country, but we do want to understand what conditions can we create in order to make change possible. So thank you very much to you all, and thank you, Stan, for leading this process. Thank you.
Okay, that's better. I can even hear myself now. Thank you, Fanny and Pumla, for those welcoming remarks, but also for framing this whole thing, that this is part of a bigger thing. And in a way, we're all fortunate to be part of this launch in more ways than one. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm really glad to say that my job is not to regale you all night with my tales. We have two remarkable South Africans in the room tonight, and we are all here to hear their stories and the interaction between the two of them. It's not every day you have two remarkable South Africans from very different generations and very different backgrounds in the same room. They're not sure how things are going to pan out, and that's the beauty of it. You know, I just love the spirit with which both of them approach it, because we didn't set an agenda. It was really about this conversation, and I'm sure, like myself, everybody's looking forward to that. But let me just say something quickly, that when I did a Google check, oh, Google is such a good friend of ours these days. When I consulted Google, there was an interesting way in which, and I'll read it to you because you'll get it. The Honorable Albie Louis Sachs, and I'll leave the born out, you don't need to know that, is an activist and a former judge on the Constitutional Court of South Africa. That's it. That's what makes us interested to listen to somebody like that. He was an activist, and he remains an activist. But he's also an internal optimist. Those of us who have read some of his stuff, those of us who have been privileged to hear him speak, will know that he is an internal optimist and a great futurist. And that's also why I'm certainly here, because we need to hear from people like yourself. And just to conclude my little introduction to Albie, I want to quote from an interview that he did with Patrick Barkin from The Guardian. And this is what you said, Albie. I hope I'm not going to shock you. I quote, "To wake up without an arm, but to feel joyously alive. Yeah. To learn to do everything, to sit up, to stand, to walk, to run, to write again. Every little detail became a moment of discovery and breakthrough. I had an absolute conviction that as I got better, my country got better." Now, what a futuristic view in the midst of such pain and trauma. And then next to me, she's bringing down the average age between us, Albie, quite significantly. And I hope you're taking enough photos. It's not every day I have this wonderful opportunity to sit next to a good-looking woman. Candice really got our attention over the last while, just by being herself, being who she is. And Candice's story, and each one of them will tell their story, so I'm not going to tell her story. They're both remarkable stories. But what I gather from Candice is, number one, she did what she did because there was a very strong sense of self. You cannot do great things unless you know who you are, and unless you're prepared to understand who you are. But she's also an inclusive thinker and practitioner. And, and the papers portrayed her in a particular way. It's very interesting. One headline said, "Woman forgives Eugene de Kock for her father's murder." Note the two unknowns there. Woman, her father. And Eugene de Kock's name is there. There's another caption that said, "Daughter of Eugene de Kock's victim, lets go of her anger." That's how other people portrayed her. This is how she portrays herself. And this is what she said: "I forgive Eugene de Kock for killing my father." And just those words encapsulate for me the fact that she took her identity. I forgive. And she owned the relationship with this man that had been killed. And so with those words, I'd like to introduce the two of them and just ask them to briefly tell us their stories, and then they will have a conversation. So don't worry if you don't see me interjecting, they will talk. So Candice, can we start with you?
Thank you. Okay, wow, what an introduction. Thank you. Okay, you guys can hear me, right? Okay, good. I'd like to thank the Institute and, of course, the wonderful UFS that have been with me throughout this journey and have allowed me to express in a deeper way what I feel and how I came to the position I'm in now. Instead of, just reading the newspapers, like Stan put it, and just taking the headlines, but they wanted to know what the deeper story was. So I'm very grateful for that. Okay, so I'm going to tell you my story, and I'm going to start with the fact that, of course, my father got killed, and he got killed by Eugene de Kock. So I'm going to fast forward to September 30th last year. This is the day that I, myself, and my family met Eugene de Kock. And now, I don't know how many of you guys would view an encounter like that in your minds, but I have to say that the reason, you'll see as I tell you the story, but so we got there, and the National Prosecuting Authority reached out to my mother, and they asked if we would like to meet Eugene. My mom asked us all. We all came to somewhat of a consensus, but as you would assume, it isn't an easy decision to make. So I was like, yes, of course, I'll go meet him. My older brother was like, wait a minute, like, for what, for who, and why? And we got to, slowly but surely, they gave us a week, so slowly but surely all of us got around to the same idea that we're gonna meet Eugene. So the day came, the National Prosecuting Authority pitched up at our home. They picked us up and we drove to the prison, which was Kgosi Mampura in Pretoria. We got to the prison and we sat around a boardroom setup. This is where the guards have their lunch. So it was myself, the three National Prosecuting Authority members, it was a counselor, it was a psychologist, and it was the pastor and the director of the prison. We all sat around this table. They wanted to give us a brief counseling session before we got to meet Eugene, of course. And in this counseling session, it was pretty brief because my family is very lighthearted in how we approach things, even though this is not a lighthearted situation, but we don't go into things too seriously. And before we were all teasing each other like, oh my gosh, you're gonna like cry, you're gonna do this, and all of us were kind of just bantering. But it got real. Like as soon as we went for tea, and they're like, okay, listen guys, the last thing we want to leave you with is he's human. And don't be scared. And of course, all of us were like, okay, be scared. Like, who came with protection? We're going to be the 9 o'clock news. And after tea, we sat around the table. They set us accordingly. So it was my mother, then it was my grandfather, my older brother, my younger brother, myself, the pastor, and an empty chair. And then the National Prosecuting Authority members filled up the other side of the table. So we're all sitting just chit-chatting, and they said, Eugene will walk in at any minute, so don't be alarmed. And we carried on chit-chatting, but a couple of minutes later, I don't know, I just turned to my right, and there he was. And I froze, because it was just a sense of anxiousness, because all of a sudden the moment is here and it's real. And I tapped my brother like, whoa, dude, like, you seeing this, right? And he was like, I'm seeing it. And then the pastor clearly got the sense that we were kind of in shock. So he fast-forwarded the process and was like, okay, guys, Eugene is here. So everyone's attention went to Eugene, and you could hear a pin drop in the room. It was that quiet. And the pastor said, okay, I'm going to introduce Eugene to you. And he went down the table individually, and he first introduced my mother, and he said, this is Sandra Mama, wife of the deceased Glenik Masilo Mama. Then he introduced my grandfather, everyone down the line, including myself. And with each one of us, Eugene would lean forward and say, pleased to meet you, pleased to meet you, pleased to meet you, and then he'd lean back. Then the pastor said, listen, he's got a hearing problem in his one ear, so you guys are gonna have to speak up, but the floor is yours. Opened the floor to us, and it started with my mother. My mother asked, basic question, why my husband? Why did you kill him? And why so brutally? I think that was the biggest concern for us. And Eugene went on to explain everything in detail. He said, while at the time the country was turning, it was a tumultuous state, and what he wanted was to show the country that he's doing something, that his government is in control, they're in charge, they're doing something. So my dad was a part of what was known as the Nelspruit 4 or 5, depending on which articles you read. And in the Nelspruit 4, basically it was just young drivers for the movement that got chosen, and they were the ones that were going to drive into Nelspruit. And the guys that my father was under, I cannot tell you because I'm not sure, but they were driving, I'm assuming, for a party-sanctioned mission at the time. And as they were driving under the Nelspruit Bridge, they got shot at. And as they were coming under, Eugene realized that the minibus wasn't stopping. So he ran down the bridge and he emptied out his whole magazine on my father, who was driving the vehicle. Then he doused the vehicle in fuel and he set them alight. And then they all got him, Eugene and his team got into the car, they shot out. And just to show that obviously there was a fight back and it wasn't a crime just committed. And they shot out of the vehicle, then they further doused the car again and lit it up. So this was reported at the time as terrorists killed in a shootout with the cops. And of course this made the government of the time look good, and it made Eugene look like a saint. He was doing his job and he was great at his job. So Eugene went on to explain this, and I'm sparing you some of the more detailed expressions that he used and the smiles and that kind of stuff. But he went into very elaborate detail of the smile and the cloud cover and all that kind of. And when he was done, I think my whole family, we were sitting like, no, you know, because it was just so much detail to take in. It was a lot to take in, because I don't think anyone wants to hear that kind of detail about someone you love, or should have at least gotten to love and gotten to know. And after that, my mom said, okay, Eugene, shoot, that's a lot, you know, and all of us, I think, had that very same expression, that was just too much to take in. And he kept wanting to explain a little further, but I think my family was just at a point where we were just like, just no, spare us the details, we fine. And my mom said, okay, Eugene, look, I forgive you, and that's it. I just wanted to know why. And she stopped talking, and then it came down the line, and everyone individually said, because I mean, that was the only question we went for, why? And it was answered, so everyone down the line said, I forgive you, I forgive you, I forgive you. And then it got to me, and as I was about to start speaking, Eugene interrupted me, and he said, I'm sorry, can I please say something? And I was like, okay. And then he looked at me, and he just opened up to me as far as just who he is as a human being. And he told me about his wife, he told me about his sons, that, you know, he had 2 sons, more or less my age, and his wife, and when it was the turn of the government, how he had to send them away. And he himself did not know where he was sending them to, but he trusted a friend of his to send them away because he knew he was going to get prosecuted. And at that time, that was the last time he ever saw his family. And he still to this day does not know where they are, if they're alive, if they're dead, if they're okay, if they're married. He knows none of those details. And after he shared that story, there was something about him opening up to me that broke down my barriers. All of a sudden, I looked in his eyes and he was human. He wasn't this thing, he wasn't this figment, he was just a human being. And I sat there just in awe, I think. I was taking it in, this moment, and just looking in his eyes and listening to him express himself to me. And afterwards I said, okay, I hear you, but I just have one question for you, you know. I had a couple, but I wanted to start with the one. And he said, and I said to him, you know, Eugene, what I want to know is, I do forgive you, but what I want to know is, do you forgive yourself? And he said to me, you know, every single time I have an encounter with a family where I see people, the one question I pray they never ask me is that question. And he's like, and here you sit today asking me that question. And he first went on some roundabout explanation of something. I don't even remember because I zoned out. I was like, he is not answering my question. And then he finally stopped talking, and I said, okay, you didn't answer my question. And he's like, I know, I'm sorry. And he just said, he looked me in the eye and he just said to me, when you've done the things I've done, how can you forgive yourself? And I think that moment alone, it broke me. I just started crying and crying and crying. And I think at that moment, it was just that connection, because he wanted to reach out and comfort me. You know, it was the strangest thing, because it's not a moment people prepare you for. You don't think you're going to feel an emotion for the person who killed your father. You know, and yet there I was broken as a person. And at that moment, I realized that it wasn't a victim-perpetrator meeting. It was 2 victims sitting next to each other. He just happened to have perpetrated on my particular incident, but we were both broken people just looking at each other and wanting, you know, someone to just see us. And I think at that moment, it just broke down everything. And I think after the buckets of tears that I cried, eventually when I collected myself, I said, okay, enough of that. You know, I want to know, are you racist? Because I had to get to the real grueling questions for me. And he said, no. And there I was just like, the first lie of the day, like, come on. You know, and then he said to me, he's like, no, because for me, when I started this war, because that's what he calls it, a war, and I actually thought that was a very accurate explanation of what apartheid was. It was a war. And he said, when I started this war, it was never a black and white thing. It was, I was a patriot of my country, and I was protecting my country. And the people that were trying to take my country, whether they were black or white, I was going to destroy them. And at that moment, it broke down another misconception I had, because I thought I went in with no judgments, yet there I was making judgments. And when he said that, all of a sudden I was like, okay, wow, okay, so you're not racist. And then after that, the meeting, we just had a few more questions, just irrelevant stuff, chit-chat, and then we got up, because the director said, are you guys done? Are you guys content with what has just happened? And all of us said yes, and he said, okay, then I'll dismiss this meeting, then the meeting's over. And as we were about to get up, and he was about to get up, because he wasn't shackled or anything, he was just wearing his orange jumpsuit with that black belt, and as he was about to get up, I said, would you mind if I gave you a hug? And he stared at me, and I was like, oh goodness, okay. And then I started backtracking, like, you know, never mind, I was just joking, like, kidding. And he was like, and then he stood up and he was like, no, you know, it just took me aback. I just, okay. And he got up and he hugged me really tightly, and he said, you know, I'm sorry for causing you to grow up without a father, and your father would have been so proud of who you've become. And I think that moment again, it was just another moment where all of a sudden this man was human, and we just had a human bond at that time. And we just stood, and he hugged every one of my family members. And just before he left, I don't know who said, I think it was one of the MPA members who said, would you guys like to take a photo so that, you know, you can commemorate this? And so we were like, sure. So my mom and I positioned ourselves next to him, and then he fixes himself up and he says, oh goodness, I have to look good because I haven't been near a woman in a while. And we were like, excuse me, you know, but that's how the encounter ended. And that just shows you how everything I'd built up before that moment just shattered. And when I went now, when we were dismissed and it was time to go home, I think I was so drained, because it was such an emotional, and it felt like it was a physical, it took a physical toll on my body and an emotional toll. It was one of those unbelievable experiences, because it's not something you read about in a book or a magazine on what happens when you meet your father's killer, you know. So it was a surreal moment, and it was a moment that of course led me to this very moment here. So yes, I think I'll conclude there.
Albie, show me your thumbnail.
There's some things Google can't give you. No, and one of them is a hug. I'm in the queue to... I just feel so proud to be a South African. We've done some things right in this country, and you've grown up in this country, and you've been curious and daring enough to take this chance. In a very South African way, the family consults, you talk, it's not just you, Candice, on your own, you're part of a team. And you're going to meet the man. And it's partly he's the actual person who killed your dad, but partly he represents a whole culture, a whole society. It's all the people who, over history, were responsible for so much hardship and you're going to face up to that. And in a sense, part of my pride is our country has helped give you the courage and the curiosity and the daring to be able to do that. I somehow feel very, very reluctant to tell my story. I've told it so many times, and I guess at least a third of the people in this room have heard me speak about Henry and the letter I got and so on, but okay, it's on the agenda. Maybe you haven't heard it from me. So I'm, in a way, telling it to you. And you know, when the chair said we come from different generations and different backgrounds, maybe there's an even bigger different things we came from that's very relevant to today's event. I was a volunteer in the freedom struggle. I kind of hitched my life and my passion and my dreams and my energy to a cause: liberation, emancipation, human beings being free. And part of that gesture, like huge personal gesture, was knowing it's dangerous. That's why it's a struggle. That's why you're in the struggle. And you pit yourself against all those external forces, and your biggest worry isn't even the external forces, it's your internal capacity. When the moment comes, or when the moments come, will you be strong enough? Will you be brave? Will you get through? And you're wondering all the time. And my experience was, as it turned out, a joyous one. It's not the loss of another person. I survived. That moment that you go to bed with at night, will they come for me tonight? Will I get through? Will I be okay? You wake up in the morning, you've got through another night, and this goes on for years. You're waiting, waiting, waiting all the time for the man to come. Now the man's not that historical man, if you like. The man is the cops, the security people, the assassins. We didn't know about the particular hit squads at that stage. And they'd come for me, and I survived. It was fantastic. I only lost an arm. I'm going to be fine. And I truly felt joyous, and it even blew away the sadness I had after the solitary confinement. You never get over solitary confinement. You get over a bomb. The solitary confinement leads a sadness, almost an existential sadness inside you, that inhuman thing of being cut off from society, from people. And then the sleep deprivation, and partly cracking up under interrogation, and boom, it's blown away. And I'm starting again, as you read, and it's like that childlike, naive thing of, look, Mummy, I can sit up. Look, Mummy, I can stand. Look, Mummy, I can walk. Look, Mummy, I can write. Look, Mummy, I can tie a shoelace. It really brought me back to that sense of growth. So in that sense, it's the opposite of your experience. It's the loss of your daddy. But maybe I'm standing in a bit. This is what's cracking me up. Maybe I'm your daddy in that sense. Not because I'm old enough, but he was a freedom fighter. He joined the struggle in his own way. He wasn't doing the things that he was alleged to be doing, but he was part of a movement like millions and millions of South Africans. And part of the joy I feel today is that he's got a daughter who's been so marvelous, spoken with such, it's a kind of calm and poise. security, confidence, a feeling of truth in its different dimensions, a willingness to embrace the contradictions, to have a sense of humor, to share it with others. And so in that sense, I'm connecting up with your daddy and feeling proud of him. And proud of South Africa, that we had a Truth Commission that tried to encourage people to open up and tell their stories. Not only the stories of those who'd been traumatized and suffered so much and had been forced to keep silent and are being told it's lies. Maybe that was the worst of it, being told that what you lived through, what you experienced, what you knew was just lies. It's keeping alive that sense of repressed anguish and rage and torment. And now you have a chance to speak and to be listened to be believed. You have a voice. It means something. To have a country where we can confront the terrible things that happened with the poise that you've shown and the beauty of spirit, to my mind is very, very meaningful. And it's a story that in itself is strong, but it's also like a flower. It's an example, it's a perfume, it's an aroma, it's music. It's an intangible thing that goes well beyond the actual event. I'd like to know a little bit more about you. Who are you? I want to know, why is your name Mama? Where did you come from?
Is it on? Okay, good. Wow, well, you're gonna get me crying again. I'm not normally this emotional, guys, seriously. Whew, okay, a little bit more about myself. Okay, the Mama, unfortunately, my dad's side of the family, we weren't able to, when my dad passed away, it caused a rift in my family life. And my mom was partly to blame for my dad's killing. Why? I don't know. So that side of the family, my dad's side, kind of detached from us altogether. So I have no connection or relationship with him. Well, somewhat. Like we'd meet like strangers would meet. And of course we know how to identify each other, but it's not a relationship. So unfortunately, giving you the background of the Mama surname itself, I can't. It's the only thing I carry about my dad that I know is tangible. But about me, goodness, I don't even know where to start. I don't even know what would be of interest to you guys. Geez, could you direct me in that?
Well, just a little bit, you grew up where?
Okay, so I grew up in a very strange situation, of course. When I grew up, what happened was, of course, my mom was only 24 when my dad passed on, and she had my older brother who was 4, and myself, I was 8 months. And she was a single mother, all of a sudden devoid of a father, like a father figure for her children. And so she sent me away to live with my great-grandmother on the farm in Mafeking. So I used to just play around with dung beetles, and life was good for me. Like, I had no care in the world. I had no idea what was happening. I was just happy. And I think only when I was about 5, she got me, and she brought me to Joburg. Then I stayed with my grandmother. And then all of a sudden I kind of knew that, okay.
What languages were you using?
Tswana.
Yeah.
Tswana at the time. So I was fully fluent in Tswana, and I could not communicate with my mother to save my life. Like, I was speaking deep Tswana. Not even the, coffee tin stuff, the real.
And your mom spoke?
She spoke Afrikaans and English. Yeah. And she spoke Tswana as well, just not my Tswana, and it was a bit of a disconnect, a disjoint, because she picked me up from the farm, and of course she wanted to kind of form a relationship with me, but I could not understand her for the life of me, and I had no idea who she was. I knew she was a lady that would bring us food